since the digital revolution, really, people in our industry have been tripping over ideas. I mean, literally everything you look at is a business model in waiting.
Hello and welcome to Traction, the show that explores innovation, growth and tech success. My name's James Taylor, founder of Rory Mouse and PR advisor to some of the world's most innovative technology companies. I'm here at Pennine 5 in Sheffield with my co-host Peter Hopton, founder of Very PC, Isotope and Venture Community. He's an investor, a mentor and the rockstar chairman to Productive Machines and Tuber. And we're joined today by a very special guest, Chris Dymond from Sheffield Digital. Chris, welcome to Traction. How's it going?
Very good, thanks.
You're a man who wears many hats.
Yep.
Including being a director of Sheffield Digital. What's taking up most of your time these days?
Well, Sheffield Digital's taking up quite a lot of time. I'm also the director of an international master's program in smart city management for an institute in Barcelona. So I run a master's degree online. We have about 50 students on the course from all over the world, and I manage a roster of, I think it's 18 academics that teach on the course at the moment. So we're about a third of the way through the program. This is the 5th year that I've been involved in it, 4th year that I've been running it as a director. So part of my time is always spent on this. So I've literally got I've got material piling up that I need to go through and check from some new units that we're running in the next few weeks. But yeah, that's a holistic course on how digital technologies are reshaping cities in kind of all the multifaceted ways in which cities are digitally transforming.
Excellent. And LinkedIn also suggests that you're entrepreneur in residence at Sheffield Business School.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about your career path and what,
Sure.
Your entrepreneurial journey and what got you to where you are now?
The thread that runs through everything is tech and computers. I grew up in a very computery household. My dad was a programmer, one of the kind of first generation of professional programmers he started in the late 60s. And worked for quite a long time for Univac and then Sperry Univac. So he was responsible for installing the first mainframe computers in banks. So we traveled around a lot when I was a kid, lived in London and Minneapolis, and then moved to near Zurich in Switzerland. We were the first family in our town to have a personal computer. We had a TRS-80 Model 1 in Christmas 1977, it arrived in our house, and I was, 7 years old or something. So I grew up programming. I grew up, in the sort of 8 and then 16-bit era of computing. I did computer science out of school, and I got a job. I started work really early. I started work when I was 16. It was the era of the whiz kids, where kids knew more about technology than the older generations did. So I got holiday jobs installing computer systems and teaching people how to use them. And I kind of got into documentation a lot. One of my first things was it was the era of the paperless office, the first movements towards a paperless office. So word processing. In my gap year, I went back to Switzerland. I'd moved to the UK just before, but went back to Switzerland for a year to work for a telecommunications company. And they just gave me a budget and said, digitize our engineering department, which was amazing. As a 19-year-old kid, I could, basically spec the highest spec PC that was available, the biggest monitor, the best scanner and printer combination, and then software to convert all of their hand-drawn diagrams and circuit diagrams into scanned digital ones that they could archive on disk. And then I went and did computer science, didn't enjoy it, fell out with my lecturers, told them they were teaching stuff that was 10 years out of date, so dropped out, and then got a job working for Galileo International in their documentation department. They're a big computer reservation systems company. And then that documentation stuff, like how to store information that can be turned into printed material, or used on screen, then became multimedia stuff, training material for travel agents around the world. And then that led me into HTML. And so my first entrepreneurial step, bearing in mind that I'd worked for this corporate for almost 3 years, I hated it. Absolutely hated the experience and the environment. Quite enjoyed the work, but didn't like. I didn't even go to my own leaving party. I hated it that much. They threw a party for me when I left, and I didn't. I just stayed in the car park. I didn't even go in. I was like 23 years old or something, 24 maybe. But yeah, 1995. The internet had just been commercialized, right? It was an academic and military network up until 94. And then the American Department for Commerce decided to commercialize it and allow private people and organizations to purchase domains. There was like these little sort of cottage ISPs were springing up, and we lived in a town in Wiltshire, near Marlborough in Wiltshire, and there was a little ISP, like a local farmer. Farmers are among the most entrepreneurial people I know, right? Farmers are always trying out new stuff. And at the time, this particular farmer was, decided to set up their own little village ISP and offer dial-up connections to people that we couldn't afford because we were, kids and skint. And my brother had walked in and said, "If we build you a website, would you give us a free connection?" And they said, "Yeah," because they had no idea how to build a website, and neither did my brother. And I was working in Derby at the time. I was a technical author and multimedia designer. And I was at home on holiday, and my brother was building a PC out of spare parts that we had lying around the house and that he'd like nicked and borrowed off friends. And in order to connect it to this dial-up modem that he'd had a package for, that this little ISP had given him, and I helped him get the PC running and dial up, and that was the first kind of connection to the internet. I'd used it a little bit at university, but it was just a whole different experience to actually connect and do what was then or became known as web surfing. Just go to different websites and see what people were publishing. But because I was in publishing, I learned how to create websites in about a week, and then we had no intention of really starting as a company. Really, we had a few local businesses. There was a Sunseeker speedboat franchise in Southampton contacted us. I don't even know how the connection happened. I think they went through this little ISP. But the first major job I had was to build a website for this luxury, speedboat retailer, dealership. And then the National Association for Health Authorities and Trusts called and said, "We need a website. We heard you made websites. We're going to give you $5,000 to build the website for the National Association for Health Authorities and Trusts." And that was like November 95. And then 6 years later, we were the main contractor to Zurich, the Zurich Financial Services Group. We built the website for the Fairford Air Tattoo and got to go to the Fairford Air Tattoo every year. We had the contract for the Royal Automobile Club on Pall Mall. Got to, I had a membership of a club in Sloane Square where Jamie Oliver was the head chef when he was at the start of his career. And then the Dotcom crash happened, and at the time it was very stressful. I'd spent most of the previous year, this is 2000, living in a suite at the top of the Tower Thistle Hotel, right next to Tower of London, working on a big financial services project in the city. I was there 4 days a week, staying in a suite on the 11th floor, just hating my life. It was it was really alienating, the whole experience, and just watching the whole market crash, and and then all of our clients, all of our startup clients went bust. They didn't get their their next tranches of funding. And our financial services clients pretty much all went on an investment freeze. We spent 7 months negotiating with, I think it was npower, it's one of the national power companies. And we got a heads of agreement to basically take over their corporate web estate and be their supplier for web services. And I think we signed, or we had the memorandum was on their desk one day, and the following Tuesday they put a corporate freeze on all new expenditure on the web, on internet. And so by April, we spent 7 months going after that contract. It was our lifeline, and we lost it. And we could have just scaled everything back, gone back down from the 45 people that we were back down to maybe 10 or 12. But I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't enjoying it at that point. I wasn't enjoying where I lived. I felt like my whole life was kind of stuck. I felt like I should have been doing something else all along. And so I decided I was out, and then others said they were out as well. So we just liquidated everything. We walked away without owing anybody anything. All of our staff got paid. I went back and did another degree in something non-technology related. I did an interdisciplinary humanities degree. And then became happy. Took me 2 years or so of doing something that I really enjoyed. And I got back together with the girl that I'd fallen in love with, and things hadn't worked out 10 years previously. She's from Sheffield. When I graduated, I moved up to Sheffield to be with her. We got married 2 years later. We have 2 kids now. We live here in Sheffield. I went back and joined another company here in Sheffield called Technophobia. I was looking around for a company that I thought was interesting and that I thought that could really develop. And I applied for like a minor admin position in the company, was clearly massively overqualified for it, having run a digital agency for 6 years. But then they called me back like a few days later and said, can we go and have a pint in a pub and have a little chat? And then they employed me as an account manager. And I said, look, I'd been there maybe a month or so, and there was just firefighting chaos, like a lot of agencies are. And I said, you need process, you need project management. So I said, I don't want to be an account manager. You need to make me your first project manager, and I'll build a project management function within the company. And we'll start actually delivering things on time and on budget, and have a process for turning around to clients and telling them no. And we'll have different processes for different types of request that comes in. And so I did that. I became head of project management. We started hiring project managers. The company started making more money. It started taking on bigger contracts. And then by 2008, they made me a director. I was initially responsible for delivery, and then I was director of business innovation. So I was working with our clients to find new ways of using technology and figuring out what all these new technologies that were coming out, like, social technologies, mobile technologies, gamification, big data, all of these things, whether they had relevance to what our clients were doing and how we could experiment with some of these things to create new value. And then part of my job was also to build an innovation environment within the company. Like, how do you get people together to actually be open and collaborative enough to change things, to feel like they have some autonomy to change things and make things better.
Traction is brought to you by Roaring Mouse, the PR and content agency building some of the world's most innovative technology businesses. And Venture Community, a cooperative society where entrepreneurs, experts and founders come together to build and accelerate startups. You talk about project management and process and providing a foundation for which that company could scale, but you also talk about innovation and coming up with new ideas and doing new things. I was going to say, which of those do you prefer? Which of those perhaps do you lean to more naturally? Or is it the same thing?
It is kind of the same thing. And honestly, I love them both. I think I love them for maybe there is a hierarchy. I like process because process frees time. That's the fundamental purpose of it. You need to, like all of the things, like companies deal with exceptions, right? You put a process in place and then things don't conform to the things that the process expects to happen, right? Things happen that are different to expectation, and they happen a lot, right? The more complicated and the more connected the world gets, the more exceptions happen. And so, yes, you can have flexible processes, but that's not the way to do it, right? That's what people have come to think agile is, when it's not. For example, like the word agile and what people think it means is a long way away from what it originally meant and what it's for. And I explain this to a lot of people. Agile is requires more discipline than traditional processes because it's on a schedule. It's on a much tighter schedule. But the reason it's on a tighter schedule is because that makes it more flexible, because you're iterating faster. So you can change what you do one iteration to the next, but within each iteration, you have to be on schedule. So you have to be very precise and process driven. That's agile software development. Agile management is trying to adopt some of those things to situations that are much more fluid and can't be and shouldn't be predicted. So yeah, I like process because it removes 80% of the things, the predictable 80% of things that occur, and makes them very efficient. So you can do those in 20% of the time, which means you then have 80% of your time to deal with the 20% of things that don't fit into the data, the ordinary running of things that are the exceptions. And that's where innovation can happen. Then you can look at those exceptions and you can start tailoring things and coming up with ways of dealing with these outliers. Whether those outliers are users that aren't catered for in niches and time markets. This is what digital technology has enabled us to do, right? It's enabled us to create companies out of nothing. We create companies out of nothing. You talk to policymakers a lot about innovation and how, they have a very narrow view of what innovation is, and that, innovation comes from science and research, and it takes a lot of effort to come up with new ideas. And, for the last, since the digital revolution, really, people in our industry have been tripping over ideas, tripping over opportunities to create value and create new businesses and new business models. Literally everything you look at is a business model in waiting. There are niches everywhere. There are interests everywhere. There's, whether it's a digital media company or whether it's a technology company, there are people that are not served in the world that need services and are willing to pay for those services in whatever way. So there's endless opportunity, I think.
I found something else out of your story that was interesting. A friend of mine, Chris Zimmerman, said to me, there are a lot of people that pursue happiness. And they build big businesses, they make lots of money, they buy fast cars, they live in hotel suites, and they are miserable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the trick is not to pursue happiness, but to pursue a beautiful life.
Okay.
Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I guess you could make that distinction. It depends how you define happiness and what makes you happy, of course. And I think it's very easy. People say, "Oh, pursue your passions because you'll never do work," but obviously, you don't necessarily infect work one way. Work can infect your passion the other way, and things that used to be exciting and interesting become routine and less interesting. But yeah, they end up owning you, and you see that a lot. Talking about niches and opportunities as media companies, you see a lot of content creators who got into a niche because of their passion for something, but are now on a content schedule, have to get content out, and it becomes a different kind of experience. And you see a lot of burnout and I'm not looking at you specifically, James.
I'm feeling good. I'm not burnt out, I hope.
So it is a
Sorry.
balance, but yeah, no, yeah, a beautiful life. You could describe it as that. I didn't pursue the life that I've got, right? In some ways, I've lucked into the life that I've got, and I'm very grateful for it. What I did was I went and did something that deep down I always felt I should have done or wanted to do, or just I wanted to know how the world works. That's what I went back to do. When I did my undergraduate degree in computer science, there was topics I liked and topics that I really didn't like, and technologies we were learning that I thought were decent, and the majority I thought were completely redundant. But the one course that I absolutely loved was social impact of computing, but it wasn't graded. We got no credits for it. It was like the one optional class we had was on the social impact of the things that we were doing. And that was the thing that I found fascinating and was really interested in. And so going back and doing that and making myself happy as a result, I think has led directly to me living the life that I've got, which exceeds my expectations or what I would have penciled in as happiness, when I made the change.
What do you think the social impact of AI is going to be?
On that subject. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I've been battling AI in a way. I guess my biggest concern is that people are going to lose the ability to construct arguments. That's the thing that I'm most worried about. I'm worried that people are using AI without really understanding how to use it effectively. There's the business model aspect of it, which, there's a lot of people that I respect mostly, who are convinced that the whole thing is going to crash because it's not creating as much value as it's costing. The numbers just don't add up. I think a lot of people are using it poorly. I think there's a lot of people that don't realize what you can do with it. They're using it. We were talking about this the other day. And there was a thing in the news just yesterday about the minister responsible for tech in the UK using ChatGPT to ask it queries about digital policy. And that's been shaped in a way that, now AI is now influencing our policy. But I think it's a perfectly sensible thing to do, because, AI can really fill in the gaps. It can. I use it a lot to just see if there's something that I hadn't thought of. Is there a way of addressing this issue, or is there an aspect to this thing that hadn't occurred to me? It's very good at doing that, of filling things in, and you can construct your prompts in a way that allow you to do that. But I still think the majority of people just use it as a glorified search engine.
One thing I heard the other day, which as a classical programmer you might appreciate. So I worked a lot on supercomputers,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a discussion going on around hardware requirements increasing. This was before generative AI and AI automation and big neural nets,
Uh-huh. Or DeepSeek.
and DeepSeek. But there was a discussion on hardware requirements increasing because of lazy programmers.
Oh, well.
And I do wonder if actually neural nets are just the ultimate in lazy programmers, and introducing these very large hardware requirements, and something that actually, as an automation or workflow, could be done with 100 lines of BASIC.
Yeah. Yeah. So code optimization is it? Well, yeah. I mean, programmers nowadays have no idea. They could just, throw clock cycles at things that we weren't able to. Obviously, yes, there's bad programming, and there are some bad programmers, and skills is maybe another topic that we could discuss. And maybe because I think a lot of AI is becoming optimized to coding. Obviously, it's like a scratch your own itch thing. The people that are creating these AIs are, want them to help them in their own work and take some of the cognitive load off coding. And there is, of course, a tendency to bloat code, to use lots of frameworks. I was talking to a senior dev friend of mine earlier in the week about trying to get colleagues to not just include stuff because they're using one function in a whole library. And the amount of bloat and the amount of complexity that results from all of this stuff. Maybe optimized or AI that's optimized for coding is actually going to make a difference to that. Maybe it's going to result in more optimized code. Maybe it's going to suggest, more efficient ways of doing things, and so that, programmers don't, get into bad habits and bloating up software. Every new release that comes out uses more resources. Things that used to run quickly end up running slower and slower. We're all used to that kind of thing.
I'm conscious this is getting to a technical level that I don't understand. Okay. So can we take it up a level? We also want to spend some time talking about Sheffield Digital and what's going on there. Yeah. But the first part of your career, you sound like you did pretty well out of the rise of the Dotcom boom, and then there was the bust. You've alluded to the fact that there has been, an AI rise, and people are talking about, could there be a bust?
Yeah.
Do they look similar to you?
I think in some ways the amount of money that is being talked about is different. There's a lot more money invested now than there was in the 2000s. I think the money was different as well. I think the thing with the 2000 .com bust was that a lot of tech money was being invested because those investors understood what first mover advantage meant, and anyone who was in early on Amazon or Google, set the landscape. And the less tech, the more institutional money was slow to react, and then just tried to buy up anything they could, and they really didn't understand the market. So there were some big failures. I don't know if you remember pets.com and Boo and Let's Buy It.com, and these were the big things that got big investment at the time. I remember one of the startups that we worked with. They were funded by the same French investment company that Let's Buy It was supported by, and they lost a lot of money. The project I was working on in London at the time, that project was burning £5 million a month. That's what our burn rate was on that project, 5 mil a month in 2000. So there's a lot of money going in. But I think the money that's being invested is different. I think people have a bit more experience of investing in tech. I don't think those institutional investors are as exposed or as ignorant as they used to be. But that's not to say it isn't going to crash. If it crashes, I don't think it's going to bring the whole of the internet business down, which is what the .com bubble bursting did, because it wasn't very big at the time.
Now, I was reflecting the other day. I think Sheffield Digital turned 10.
Yeah.
It feels like Sheffield's tech and digital sector has come an awful long way in those 10 years. How has that looked from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess from the outside it might look like a nice smooth upward trajectory, but from inside it's been spiky. It's been very up and down, and of course COVID is a major kind of thing in the middle of it. And it also depends what you measure. We're an ecosystem organization, so we measure kind of connections and activity and relationships and buzz and events and what people are doing, and we think that's a really important component that makes for a good environment for people to come and play, take part.
Do you get a sense of pride in the work that Sheffield Digital has done and helped influence, and the fact that we do have more of a thriving tech and digital ecosystem now? Or do you kind of feel a sense of frustration that you wish it had gone further and faster?
I mean, in some ways I don't think we do. in some ways I don't think it is necessarily bigger and more thriving and everything else. It's odd. Maybe it's because we're so kind of conscious of what's happening that there always seems like there's loads happening. Do you know what I mean? Like when sometimes it's hard to see how big the water is that you're swimming in because you're just concerned with the water that's around you. It seems like there's loads of water, right? If you're kind of in it. So maybe I don't have the right kind of perspective. We always hear from other cities and other or cluster organisations like ours. We wish we had something like Sheffield Digital. People in tech associate Sheffield with Sheffield Digital a lot. We kind of get that kind of that thing reflected back. We're part of and a founder of the UK Tech Cluster Group, which is kind of the umbrella association for cluster organisations in UK cities, and so we do talk to our colleagues in other cities, and I'd really love to do a piece of research on how all of these cluster organisations work and their histories, because they're all different. They all have different business models. They're all funded differently, and we've been intentionally and very specifically independent since we started. Other cluster organisations are funded by public money primarily. We've always wanted to work with partners, and we've always wanted to be supported by our membership and as of last year, by partner organisations that pay a fee: the universities, the City Council, Sheffield Tech Parks, the college. So the business model is kind of working. So yeah, the things I'm most proud about are probably the fact that we're an established organisation, that we're going to be celebrating our 10th anniversary. I think it's the 25th of May is the actual date that we incorporated. And I'm really proud of the fact that that Sheffield has something like Sheffield Digital that people outside the city associate. And I'm proud of a lot of the work that people do that I'm not even, involved in.
I saw the other day you launched some digital policy roundtables.
Yes.
And there's an opportunity there for businesses to get involved, talking to policymakers to shape things. What are you hoping to achieve there? Is there an underlying assumption that the people who are doing policy are perhaps missing a trick?
Well, first of all, I'm looking to facilitate relationships. I want more people in business here to have relationships with people that are responsible for shaping the policy landscape here. That's primarily, I want there to be dialogue. I don't want our policymakers to be working in a vacuum. And I don't, because people get lobbied a lot, people that are responsible for budgets get lobbied. And, they quite rightly, they're not always as proactive as they could be in seeking advice from everyone who's going to be affected by some of those policy decisions. And equally, people in business are very kind of focused on their business and focused on the bottom line. And, policy doesn't seem that relevant. Maybe there are national policies around, data and data protection relationships with other countries in terms of where you allow data to go and how you service international customers. And if you're doing financial transactions, there's a whole set of international financial regulations and policy that you need to be aware of. There's lots of that. There's lots of legal stuff. There's lots of compliance stuff, but that's not really local. The stuff that we can do local is about the talent pipeline. It's about investing and finding more investment from outside in the ecosystem here to build capability, to make it easier to attract people who are going to improve your business, people that are going to make a difference to the quality of your software and the quality of the user experiences that you're creating. That's the kind of stuff we want. So I want businesses to be more aware of policy and the stuff that's happening in the ecosystem that affects them, and I want policymakers to be more conscious of the companies and what they actually do, how they actually operate. I think there's still a really big gap in understanding between people that are making policy, especially at a regional and local level, and the digital industries and what their business models are, how they work, what their production processes are. Like, a lot of this part of the world understands manufacturing, understands, how you convert raw materials into product, but they don't understand how you convert thoughts into pixels and data into into value.
One thing that occurred to me from your story earlier, your first major customer. Your first major customer sounded like the kind of customer today that wouldn't buy until you've collected a large number of ISO badges and been existing as a company for 20 years.
Yeah.
With your digital policy agenda, you've got a customer back then that was adopting at the start of an innovation curve.
Yeah.
That was supporting a business that was an upstart.
Yeah.
In that curve. What can we do to get our conservative public sector organisations to regain that innovation mindset that seems to have been lost in the 90s?
Yeah, I think, well, for one thing, I think people were looser with budgets. Back then, I think it was easier to take a more portfolio approach to your innovation work. So, you've got a certain amount of money that you're putting into new ideas, new technologies and concepts. Most of that money is spent very conservatively now, but back then maybe there was a bit more to be spent on things that may or may not pan out. This was a getting toes wet kind of thing that they wanted to do. I think more of our public sector organisations need to take a portfolio approach where 10% of their budget is basically thrown away at ideas that have a very small chance of success. But as long as you learn from what you're attempting, it's still very valuable. I also think, and this is kind of pre-COVID, there was a big strategic move by Sheffield City Council to shift to a multi-vendor procurement model for the city, similar to what happened in Bristol 10 or 15 years ago, and break up large contracts and award smaller contracts to more bidders, including local bidders. And they actually arranged for some market engagement events with local companies, local providers, to build relationships with service providers to understand what the city actually offers and how many companies and agencies there are in the city that can provide services to the city council and its partners. I don't know where that got to. I'm obviously COVID is a big inflection point for a lot of things, including public sector tech. But I would like to see that continue. So yeah, it's one of the things that's kind of on my agenda to have conversations about at the policy roundtable, but also just in conversations with our partners at Sheffield City Council and the universities and other anchor institutions about how they procure and whether they can, whether they have a plan to open procurement up to more local companies.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, that's all for now from all of us here at Traction. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of the show. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, share and follow us for future episodes. Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.